Something I get asked a lot about is how best to train for health. So in this series of videos, I'm going to focus in on the specific types of training that you need to be doing in order to optimize your health. Probably an important thing to do first, just talk a little bit about what you're trying to achieve when you're training for health. A useful definition of health I use is that your body is always trying to maintain something called homeostasis. That's just a balance. It's like the Goldilocks zone for everything you could think that would happen physically and mentally within our bodies. So our bodies like it to be just the right temperature. We don't want to be too hot, too cold. We like to have just the right amount of stress. Not too much, but also not too little. We like to have the right amount of tension in our muscles. We like our blood pressure to be in a very specific range. We like just the right amount of dopamine in our brain. We like just the right amount of sugar, not too much, not too little. We get the idea. Every physiological thing that could interact with our health, there is a sweet spot for how much your body and your mind will need in order to operate optimally. So I've broken this topic down into a series of separate videos. And the first one we'll focus on today is having a look at how you can use training techniques to reduce the amount of muscle tension you've got. Really, really useful if you spend time sitting at the desk, if you experience a lot of stress during the day, particularly around the neck and the shoulder area, but also lower back, thighs and quads, hips can also get quite tense. Because having too much tension is not great. It can reduce your flexibility, it can make joints stiff, and it can make movements difficult. It can also produce problems when you try and start exercising. Certain muscle groups are working too hard, even when they're not supposed to be using them during the exercise, and that can result in pain. So there are a couple of techniques that we can go through to actually help us relax certain muscle groups, get back in contact with them, so we've got good connection with them, develop that connection between our mind and our body in order to be able to regulate the amount of muscle tension you've got, so that you've got all of your joints and your muscles are functioning optimally. The side benefit, in addition to some of the physical benefits, is that actually when we reduce muscle tension, we also reduce psychological stress as well. That muscle tension is perceived by our brain as a threat or a need to respond to a stress. And actually, the system works both ways. So we can reduce the stress, and that will reduce the muscle tension, but also, and sometimes easier, is we can actually reduce the muscle tension, and our brains and our body will then relax, feeling that there's less physical stress. You're not going to need any tools for these exercises I'm going to show you, but it is useful if you've got these. These are trigger point balls. And they can be very handy for passive myofascial release. The problem with doing exercises is that you have to be actively involved, whereas these, you're able to lay still and focus on your breathing and focus on relaxation to get muscles to relax. Another non-essential tool, but one that is worth investing in, is a foam roller. Again, if you spend a lot of time sitting at the desk and that's the reason for some of the muscle tension, great versatile piece of kit to help you actually get those muscles to relax and change your postural position when you're doing breathing and relaxation drills. And another piece of kit that I've found I've used over and over again is what I call a back magic. I don't know what they're officially called. This is a body tech postural back thing. But what it does is it's able to give you a graduated curve, unlike the foam roller. And so again, it can be really, really useful to lay over and passively relax. It can help again with a lot of desk posture, so well worth investment. The good thing about all those tools is they're really, really cheap. They don't take up much space, so you don't need a full gym to have them, and you can have them at the office, you can have them at home. Again, you don't need these, but they do help. Okay, so let's go through a routine just to stretch off the muscles around the upper shoulders and the neck. And when I say stretch off, what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series of repeated stretches, and in between those stretches, what we're actually going to be doing is focusing on breathing. So breathing is a really key way of being able to tap into your central nervous system to regulate your stress down. And this is going to actively allow you to relax muscles more easily. And a relaxed muscle is one that's going to lengthen far more easily. So you don't feel like you're pulling against the stretch with a lot of force. You feel like you're actually able to just relax the muscles and encourage more movement, which is ultimately what we want from these exercises. So to begin with, what you're going to do is just move your hand across to the opposite side of your head and just gently pull your head across. And with all these stretches, you're looking to aim for about 7 out of 10 in terms of the stretch sensation, the intensity of the stretch sensation. So pull your head across just gently. And at this point, what I tend to do is I try and close my eyes. It allows me to focus on not the incoming stimulus from around, but actually what's going on in the muscle itself. Just allows me to tune in a little bit more. And as I just gently pull that across, I'm going to feel the stretch go all the way down my neck and into my shoulder. I'm going to take a nice deep breath in. And as I breathe out, just gently move that stretch up to around about 7 out of 10. I'm just going to hold it for a few seconds until that initial intensity has started to dissipate. So just going to hold it there for a few seconds. And this could take 10 seconds, 20. When you get really good, you can do it more rapidly, but at the beginning you might find that you're needing to hold it there for far longer. But again, I'm going to use my breath. So I'm going to breathe in and let my shoulders relax. I'm going to let the tension go out of other areas of my body to improve the amount of movement I'm going to get through my neck. And you just repeat that breath as many times as you need to, because your shoulders will reactivate and re-engage. You breathe in and you exhale and let them drop. And this time I'm going to try and pull into the stretch a little bit further. So nice deep breath in. Now the stretch is up to, it feels like about a 9 or 10. A very intense stretch down through my neck. I'm just going to spend a few seconds breathing through that, try and let that relax. And I'm going to focus my mind on the muscle group that's stretching and try and allow it to let go. So I can just feel it starting to let go, and that's perfect. So I'm going to do one more nice deep inhale. Exhale and pull back. And now I've got much more range in my neck, but the stretch still feels like similar intensity, about 7 out of 10, to the same sort of intensity I had at the beginning, but now I've got more range of movement. So I'm just gently going to let my neck come back to normal. I'm just going to repeat the same on the other side, but on the other side, I just meet that resistance far sooner. So I haven't got quite the same range. The tension is higher on this side. Nice deep breath in. And immediately on this side, the intensity is different. The left-hand side was very relaxed. So because it's more intense on this side, I'm not going to try and rush the process. I'm going to hold it here and just spend a bit of time inhaling and exhaling, trying to remember to allow the rest of my body to relax as well. Let my shoulders go. And that's just beginning to drop off now, so that's not quite so intense. So nice deep breath in. Now the stretch I'm getting down the side of my neck here, in order to increase the stretch slightly without pulling my head across any further, what I'm going to imagine is I'm pushing this center point of my neck up towards the ceiling that way. So I'm going to use the muscles on the left-hand side of my neck in order to create more of an intense stretch down the right-hand side without moving my head any further. Nice deep breath in, and then as I exhale, I squeeze the left-hand side of my neck and I push the right-hand side of my neck towards the ceiling. And that intensifies the stretch back up to about an 8 or 9 out of 10. So for the last time, we're just going to do a couple of nice deep inhales and exhales. And then gently let that go. So I just feel like I've got a little bit more freedom of movement either side of my neck range. Now, one of the other areas that develops a lot of muscle tension is actually around the hips and the thighs, particularly if we spend a long time sitting. So kneeling hip flexor stretches are a great way to loosen off through the front of the hip, but there are a couple of tips that can help you to progressively loosen the hips without also involving the lower back. So first and foremost is actually pushing down into the knee that's resting on the floor. So pushing down through there will give you some stretch through the front of your hips and down the front of your thigh on this back leg straight away without doing anything else. If you want to intensify that stretch before you even move the hips, actually tucking your toes underneath elevates the height of your lower leg, which means that actually these muscles are put on stretch straight away. So that even when you're setting up this exercise, you can feel a little bit of a stretch through here, particularly if those muscles are tense. In order to stretch them, what we want to be able to do is we want to tuck the hips that way. So we want to avoid pushing forward through our spine. I want to actually push your tailbone down towards the floor, tucking the hips underneath. And that's going to intensify the stretch across the front of the hip, as opposed to extending forwards through your back and feeling nothing down through the hips. So that movement there is key. So tucking the pelvis underneath, and then you slide the hips forward, but you try and leave your chest and your shoulders behind. Because what you want to do is you want to actually extend the hip joint here in order to stretch at the front. Now with these are dynamic stretches. So we're going to employ the same breathing technique. So nice deep breath in. And then as you push forward, just breathe out and let everything relax. Now as you're doing this and you move further forwards, is there going to be a temptation to, again, use your spine to get more range? But the range we want is specifically through the front of the hip. So in order to do that, we're going to squeeze this right glute here. So you're going to tense your glute as you push forward, and that's going to give you more stretch. So with dynamic stretching, what you want to do is be progressive. So we want to make the stretch more intense by changing the variation. So the similar setup, this time you have your back foot on a raised platform, either a step, a bench, a chair, or even against the wall. What this does is it automatically puts this quad muscle down the front and the hip flexors on the stretch straight away. So now they're already pulled tight. So any movement of the hips forward is going to be quite an intense stretch. But you just do exactly the same breathing technique. Nice deep breath in, tuck the hips under, and then push forward. And try and get as much of an extension from your hip and not through your spine as you can. We push forward for a few seconds. And then just allow your body to relax back, allow the muscles to shorten again, take the stretch intensity off, and then back in. Now for some of you, that last stretch may have been perfectly sufficient, but if you're still feeling like there's more range, then this is probably the final variation which will give you maximum stretch, because we're also going to introduce a rotation through the hips and through the spine, which is going to maximize the stretch that you're going to get through the quads and through the hip flexors. So if you get to this point and you haven't loosened the hips off, there's a problem, because these stretches used back to back will really stretch the hip flexors out to their fullest, and they'll be as loose as you could possibly get them to be. So for this one, you're going to put the opposite hand across in line with your foot. You're actually going to reach backwards here, try and grab the foot from behind, and you're going to pull the foot. You've got two ways of increasing the stretch. One is you pull the foot in towards your glutes, and the other one is you extend through your hips. And just rocking in and out, and again using the breath. So nice deep breath in as you come back, breathe out as you lunge forward. I'll do those on the other side as well, just to see it from both angles. So you're reaching back and grabbing your foot, and you've got two ways to do it. You can pull the foot in towards your bum, and you can also extend the hips forwards like that as well. So you can do both at the same time. Nice deep breath in, breathe out. Now, I always find this exercise serves as a very good indication of how well you're able to control the tension that you have through the quads and through the hips. I think if you can do this movement really well, it's a good sign that you're actually able to allow these muscles to relax when they need to relax, and then they can be tense during exercises. If you can't do this movement particularly well, you're just holding too much tension in these muscles all the time, and the exercises we've covered and the breathing drills we've covered up until this point will help you to be able to solve that. But for this drill, Probably best off starting with a yoga block or something behind you that you can lean on. You set that up close to your feet. Sit back onto your feet with the heels just pointing outside your bum and the knees about hip width or shoulder width apart. And then what you're going to try and do is walk yourself back onto your elbows. In this case, I'm going to lay down onto the yoga block. And then from there, if you're able to get your hips to come up, it's a good indication that you're able to extend enough through the hips here to be able to assume this position, where obviously you've got the quads on stretch. Now, you've got a couple of different ways you can make this exercise more difficult. We could get rid of the yoga block and lay flat on the ground, which means that we have to flex the knees further in order to go flatter. And also you can bring the knees in towards each other as well, which constricts the movement through here and forces more extension to have to come from hip flexors and quads. So if we get rid of the yoga block, and you come back onto elbows to begin with, and then gently down onto the floor, and just settle in through there. Now the same rules apply. If you take a nice deep breath in and then tuck your pelvis as you exhale. If you inhale and then as you exhale, you tighten the glutes. And you actually squeeze your core so that your rib cage comes down towards your pelvis and the top of the pelvis comes up towards the rib cage. Then what you're getting through here is true extension without the involvement of your spine as well. And if you can get yourself into this position, you know that you have a stretch and a tool that you can use to check as a measure to see if you are tense and if you are holding too much tension through here, and also as a final stretch to use after you've taken the other more gentle steps in order to just re-regulate that flexibility and encourage more free movement from your hips. I already mentioned at the beginning using a foam roller, so I'll just go through a couple of exercises that can really help to reduce the tension actually that occurs through the front of the shoulders and through our chest, but the effect of the tension here is that it rolls your posture, it rolls your shoulders forward and rounds the upper back and puts the neck in a position where it's having to work excessively hard. So what the foam roller will do when you put it underneath your mid-back is actually it will help us encourage the spine into the opposite position where you've got open chest posture and actually relieve some of the tension through the back of your neck. So particularly good for if you spend a lot of time at the desk. To begin with this one, you pop the foam roller perpendicular to your back and then just gently lay back so that the foam roller is just underneath your shoulder blades. And then from there, just support the back of your head with your hands. And we're going to try and gently extend the spine over the foam roller so that your spine is just gently matching the curvature of this foam roller. And just go as far as you feel comfortable. And then again, use breathing to help your body relax. So nice deep breath in, and then as you descend back towards the floor, just breathe out and exhale gently. So just gentle extensions. And there are a couple of options to modify this. So you can gently move yourself further down. The foam roller will move further up your spine, and then you just repeat the process. And then this will work on the vertebrae further up your spine. And there'll be a sweet spot too far down the spine, and you'll just be extending the lower back, which is not really what we're supposed to be targeting. Too high up, and you will actually not be able to extend far enough to really use the foam roller properly. So there is just a middle section where your shoulder blades are, where this exercise is really effective. Now, a couple of tips. I can reach back through my neck by extending my head, but I'm actually not changing the position of my shoulders or my upper back doing that. So try to keep your chin tucked by supporting your head with your hands and extending from the middle of your spine to the upper spine, but not your neck. And then the other tip is what you do with your elbows. If you keep your elbows tucked in, your shoulders will remain rolled forward. If you open your elbows out towards the floor, you also open across the chest and you shorten and engage the muscles around the upper back that will help to reduce the tension in your neck and shoulders over time. So opening up across the chest is a key aspect of being able to make this exercise as effective as possible. Okay, this exercise just looks like I'm going to be laying down, but I'm going to be using one of these, which is a trigger point ball. And I'm going to use this in the side of my hip in a small muscle called the TFL. And what that's going to help me to do is actually move my hip and my pelvis independently from one another and give me a little bit more flexibility and range. So this ball is going to go into my hip just at the top where my pocket sits, in the seam. And I'm just going to gently lower my body down onto the rib cage. And then what I'm going to do is move my hips forwards and backwards gently. So the ball is just in my hip there, forwards and backwards, until I find the spot and the ball presses on it and I get an intense pressure. And the first few times you do this, it's a bit of a shock to the system. And what you have to do in order to regulate that shock to the system is use your breathing to actually relax the rest of your body and your mind and convince yourself that this is going to be okay. And it's a really key skill to have to be able to down-regulate the tension and the stress response in the body from having this ball sticking into your hip. So nice deep breaths are going to be necessary the first few times you do this. The other thing you can do when you're in this position is once you've found somewhere that's particularly painful, which this is, within the hip, is keep the pressure on that area, but actually try and relax other areas of your body because everything's going to tense up to try and keep the weight off that ball. Trying to let the rest of your body relax is going to help to actually reduce the intensity of that sensation. And then the second thing you can do is you can tip your hips forwards and backwards. So rather than just moving forwards and backwards, you can actually rotate slightly in order to find the best position to be in to get the best release. And what you're looking for from this technique is as you breathe and you relax onto the ball, is over the course of about 45 seconds to a minute on one side, you will feel that initial intensity dissipate. So it won't feel quite as aggressive as it does when you first lay on the ball. And that's all you need from this technique. As soon as you have felt that you're able to move relatively freely around on the ball without that same sharp feeling, then you've effectively relaxed those muscles around your hip joint, and then you get to do the whole thing again on the other side. And now we're going to go back to looking at the shoulders and the neck. We're going to look at the role that the tension through your chest might play in how tense the muscles are at the back of your neck. And as I said before, the more open and upright your posture is, the less these muscles at the back of your neck are having to work hard all day long. So it's beneficial for us to actually loosen off the muscles across the front of the chest to allow the shoulders to sit further back, because simply it has a better effect on those other muscle groups. And one of the best stretches to do that is actually a single arm pec stretch. And you can do this in a doorway, you can use a wall like I'm going to, or you can use a TRX or a cable machine if you're going to do both arms at the same time. But essentially the technique is the same regardless of which version you use. I'm going to go through some of the details of the technique. First of all, you want to put your hand just a little bit higher than your shoulder, ideally. This is going to allow us later on to be able to drop body height to get the most effective stretch. You want your fingers to be facing backwards. The reason for this is that it's actually going to put your upper arm into an externally rotated position. So it's going to rotate your arm like that. And that rotation there lengthens the muscles, the target muscles for this stretch, which are the pecs. So that's going to be a key attribute. If I roll my arm in like this and I do the same stretch, I'm not going to feel any lengthening effect across my chest here, but I am going to be adding tension to the muscles that we're actually trying to relax. All right, so the arm is facing backwards, hand is just a little bit higher, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to step forwards beyond my arm. That's going to pull all the way across my chest, and what I'm looking for is a stretch to come across into the middle of my chest. And then I'm going to take that nice deep breath again, inhale, and exhale and push into the stretch. Now you can see that I'm staggering my feet, one foot in front of the other, and this just enables me to be able to move my body weight forwards and backwards with ease. So I'm not leaning and putting too much pressure on my arm. I can control how much of my body weight leans forwards or leans back. Nice deep breath in. Breathe out. And stretch. So there's an aspect of this stretch where I'm leaning towards the wall and I'm starting to take my shoulder towards the wall, but I'm also moving my body weight forwards as well. And it's the combination of those two that will stretch across my chest. I'm just going to move in for a few seconds and move back out. And if I want more stretch, all I do is I can take my hand a little bit higher. And once I've got to the end range, take a deep breath in. I'm going to drop my body height and lean towards the wall. And that will give me a really good pull all the way across the chest into the sternum. Using some of these stretching techniques and the breathing techniques is going to help you to relax some of the key areas in our body that just tend to hold some of that tension. It's going to restore some of the muscle function. So you're going to be able to exercise without causing additional tension and fatigue in muscles that are already working hard. It's also going to have the effect of actually getting you to focus on your body and down-regulate some of that stress response that causes some of that tension. You're also going to get much better body awareness. So you're going to actually be able to feel through those stretches which joints and which muscles will move and flex and relax easily and which ones are stubborn and remain tense. And then over time, if you repeat this regularly, you'll develop the skill of being able to allow those muscles to relax and be aware of when they're not relaxed. The feeling you get when you're tense and you're holding your muscles will contrast to how you know you can feel at the end of a stretching session. And that is the intuition you will need in order to not only regulate the health of your muscular system, but also your mental health as well. So in this regards, you're going to be better and more skilled at being able to find homeostasis when it comes to the amount of tension that you're holding. I'm going to follow up with more videos in this same series where I'll look at other aspects of your physiology that need to be in that state of homeostasis, that balance, in order for you to have optimal health. But if you've got any specific ideas or things that you would like videos on, please leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you.